Linux Mint versus Pop OS, long-term stability and productivity showdown. Linux Mint or Pop OS, which one quietly breaks less often? And which one actually makes you more productive after months, not just days? Today, we put both distros through a long-term lens: update policy, drivers, desktop ergonomics, and the real-world headaches that decide whether a system stays a workhorse or becomes a maintenance chore. Brief framing and methodology. In this test, we're not benchmarking synthetic scores. Instead, we simulate 6 months of daily use, regular system and kernel updates, mixed workflows, office apps, web dev, containerized apps, light media editing, switching between integrated and discrete GPUs, and occasional troubleshooting, failed package, driver regressions, config drift. For each category, I'll explain the practical checks I ran and the recovery steps you'd likely need in the wild. Release and update philosophies, stability versus freshness. Linux Mint intentionally favors a conservative, set and forget approach. Mint's releases are typically built on Ubuntu LTS basis and get long security support windows, which prioritize packet stability and predictable life cycles. For example, recent Mint 22.x series releases are marketed as long-term support branches. Pop OS System 76 leans toward a more proactive update cadence. Pop OS publishes LTS images, but also moves faster on kernels, drivers, and its desktop environment, Cosmic. The design makes Pop OS attractive on very new hardware and for users who want fast access to kernel device updates, but faster movement means a slightly higher window for regressions. System 76 pages for Pop OS and their Cosmic update notes show active, ongoing feature releases even inside LTS cycles. Practical takeaway: Mint trades bleeding edge for predictability, good for older machines or teams where no surprises matters. Pop OS trades predictability for newer hardware friendliness and faster fixes. Better if you need the latest kernel or GPU driver quickly. Driver and hardware compatibility. NVIDIA support is a critical flashpoint. Pop OS historically ships curated NVIDIA images and installer flows, and System 76 invests in improving the driver experience. This is a major selling point. That said, recent user reports and issue threads show occasional installer or driver hiccups tied to very new GPUs or new Pop OS releases, meaning you usually get a smooth experience. But when something goes wrong, it can be noisy. Linux Mint relies on upstream Ubuntu kernels and the broader Ubuntu NVIDIA ecosystem. That conservatism reduces the chance of sudden breakage on tried-and-true hardware. But it also means Mint users might wait longer for optimized fixes for brand new GPUs. Community forums show that Mint users sometimes face update manager or kernel transition annoyances that require manual kernel installs or extra troubleshooting steps. Practical takeaway: if you have bleeding-edge GPU hardware, new RTX generation or workstation cards, and want the vendor driver ASAP, Pop OS often gets you there faster. If you run older, well-supported hardware and prefer fewer surprises, Linux Mint's steadier base is safer. Desktop and workflow. Cinnamon versus Cosmic Gnome. Cinnamon, Linux Mint, is intentionally conservative, feature-rich, tweakable, and designed so workflows don't change unpredictably between updates. For long-term productivity that matters, keyboard shortcuts, panel placement, applets, and window behavior stay consistent. Users who rely on muscle memory for dozens of daily actions appreciate this stability. Cosmic Gnome, Pop OS, emphasizes a modern workflow: tiling, workspaces, and focused session flows. Cosmic has matured rapidly and receives notable point updates, adding convenience features. That modernity boosts productivity for power users who adopt its workflow, but the trade-off is occasional UI interaction changes as the day evolves. Practical takeaway: choose Cinnamon if you want a long-lasting, predictable desktop that behaves the same after months. Choose Pop OS Cosmic if you want features that can increase throughput and you're comfortable adapting to small UX changes over time. App packaging, Flatpak, Snap, APT, and dependency headaches. Both distros now heavily lean on Flatpak for easy app installs from FlatHub. Mint has historically promoted Flatpak in its software manager, and Pop OS also supports Flatpak alongside traditional APT. Snap is less favored in Mint by default and remains contentious for some users because of Canonical's Snap ecosystem. Universal package formats reduce dependency hell but introduce version isolation trade-offs, sandboxing, larger disk use, theming quirks. A recent comparative analysis of universal packaging outlines these trade-offs and the continuing ecosystem split between Snap and Flatpak. Practical takeaway: for long-term reliability, prefer using distro repositories for system tooling and Flatpak for desktop apps. That combo minimizes breakage from core library updates while keeping apps current. Recovery: how each distro behaves when things go wrong. Linux Mint recovery is often straightforward. Older kernels are retained in the grub menu. The update manager lets you hold back or view risk ratings, and the conservative repo choices reduce rare catastrophic breaks. Community forum threads show Mint users resolving update manager edge cases with manual kernel reinstalls, but the path to recovery is usually documented and community-friendly. Pop OS System 76 offers its own recovery tools and an active issue tracker, and Pop OS's system debut plus shim approach can make certain recovery steps faster. When regressions happen, especially with brand new hardware or major day updates, you may need to apply more distro-specific fixes or engage System 76 documentation issue threads. Practical takeaway: Mint gives you a gentler failure surface and more predictable rollback options. Pop OS gives you faster fixes but sometimes requires more hands-on fixes for new regressions. Long-term maintenance cost, time, and mental load. Measured across 6 months, Mint generally demanded fewer emergency interventions for standard office dev workflows. Pop OS required slightly more attention when major kernel driver stacks updated, but that attention often resulted in genuine improvements, better hardware performance, new features. Your tolerance for occasional troubleshooting should guide the choice. Mint minimizes interruptions, Pop OS maximizes hardware fidelity and feature velocity. The verdict: who wins for long-term stability and productivity? Long-term stability, least surprises Linux Mint. Conservative base plus familiar desktop is equal to fewer midlife surprises. Productivity for power users and new hardware. Pop OS, Cosmic and faster kernel driver adoption deliver measurable workflow wins on modern systems. Best recovery experience for desktop users. Lean Mint for predictable recovery paths. Pick Pop OS if you value System 76 active maintenance and faster bug fixes for new hardware. Final recommendations: if you're installing on older or repurposed hardware, or you need a system to just work for months with minimal babysitting, pick Linux Mint. If you use cutting-edge laptops' GPUs, work in multi-monitor or tiling workflows, or want the latest kernel and driver support, pick Pop OS. Test the latest ISO for your GPU model before committing. For teams or classrooms where consistency matters, standardize on Mint images. For solo creators, devs, or gamers with new hardware, Pop OS often yields faster wins, at the cost of being slightly more hands-on after some updates. Short checklist for a 6-month maintenance plan. 1. Keep regular backups. Time shift plus of sight. 2. Prefer distro repos for system packages, Flatpak for desktop apps. 3. Before any major kernel driver update, snapshot or note how to boot an older kernel. 4. Test new ISOs on a USB or VM for mission-critical hardware, ESP. NVIDIA.